He was the most powerful man in the room. She was invisible to everyone in it. One moment of public cruelty, one decision that cost him nothing and changed everything. Nathan Cross didn't cross that ballroom because he knew her. He crossed it because no one else would. What happened next wasn't a fairy tale. It was messier than that. More painful. More real. Because kindness without courage means nothing. And some people will burn down everything good in your life just to prove they still have power over you. This is their story. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this one travels. And stay with us until the end. The Harrington Grand Ballroom was the kind of place that made ordinary people feel small on purpose. Everything about it was designed to remind you where you stood. The ceilings stretched up 4 stories, gilded and cold. The chandeliers, 40 of them, someone had once told Nathan, though he'd never bothered to count, threw down light that was specifically engineered to be flattering to expensive clothing and unkind to everything else. The marble floors were so polished you could see your own reflection walking beneath you, a pale ghost of yourself following you everywhere you went. Nathan Cross had been coming to the Harrington Foundation's annual Winter Gala since he was 9 years old. He knew which waiters refilled your glass before you asked. He knew which corner of the East Terrace had a draft that cut straight through a tuxedo in January. He knew the exact moment, usually around 45 minutes in, when the room's collective performance of joy reached its peak and then began its slow, tired descent into people just waiting for a reason to leave. He was good at noticing things that other people missed. It came with the territory of being the kind of man everyone watched while pretending not to. Tonight, he was standing near the far end of the bar, nursing a glass of sparkling water he hadn't asked for, and listening to a man named Gerald Fitch describe in exhaustive detail a skiing trip to Aspen that had happened 3 years ago. Nathan had heard the story before. Gerald told it at least once a year, always with a slightly different version of the avalanche scare that had allegedly almost killed him. And the guide, this absolute mountain of a man, he looks at me and he says, "Mr. Fitch, you've got about 30 seconds before—" Nathan heard it before he saw it. A sharp crack of sound, the kind that a tray makes when it hits marble, followed immediately by the collective inhale of 250 people turning toward the same spot. He looked. A young woman in a white catering uniform was crouching on the floor, hands moving quickly, gathering broken glass and scattered hors d'oeuvres with the practiced efficiency of someone who was already calculating how much trouble this was going to cost her. Her dark hair had come partially loose from whatever she'd pinned it up in. One knee of her uniform pants was wet with something. She hadn't dropped the tray by accident. Nathan had seen enough of these rooms to know the difference. The man standing above her was tall, expensive-looking in the self-conscious way of someone who'd bought his suit specifically to look effortless. Mid-30s, strong jaw, the particular expression of a person who has just done something deliberately humiliating and is now performing surprise. "You need to watch where you're going," the man said. His voice carried. He made sure it did. "Do you have any idea what was on that tray?" The woman on the floor didn't answer. She kept collecting broken pieces with her bare hands. "Hey!" The man crouched down slightly, not to help her, but to get closer to her face. His voice dropped, but the room had gone quiet enough that it didn't matter. "I'm talking to you, Emily." She knows him, Nathan registered. "Ryan." Her voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of quiet that comes from working very hard to keep something locked down. "Please don't do this here." "Don't do what?" Ryan stood back up to his full height. He spread his hands in a gesture of innocence that was perfectly calibrated for an audience. "I'm just saying you should be more careful, but then again, careful was never really your thing, was it?" Soft laughter from somewhere. "Not many people, maybe 4 or 5, but enough." Nathan set down his glass. Gerald Fitch was still talking. "And the avalanche came down maybe 200 meters to the—" Nathan walked away from him mid-sentence. He'd apologized to Gerald later. Gerald would tell the story again at next year's gala, and the avalanche would have moved to 150 meters. That was fine. Some things could wait. Some things couldn't. He crossed the ballroom floor in a straight line, which was unusual. The Harrington Gala wasn't the kind of event where people moved in straight lines. You curved, you angled, you paused to acknowledge someone more important than whoever you were walking toward. Moving directly toward anything suggested urgency. and urgency suggested vulnerability. And vulnerability was the one thing this room had no tolerance for. Nathan didn't particularly care. He reached the woman, Emily, the man had called her. Just as she was rising from the floor, a pile of broken glass balanced carefully on the remains of the tray. She looked up at him with the kind of expression people wear when they're bracing for one more thing to go wrong. He spoke before she could. "There you are." He said it easily, like a man who just found someone he'd been mildly looking for. "I've been looking for you." Emily blinked. "I'm sorry?" He turned to look at Ryan, the expensive man, who was now watching with narrowed eyes and a recalibrating expression. "I don't think we've met," Ryan said, seeing. His tone was the careful kind, not quite hostile yet, checking first to see who Nathan was. Nathan Cross was very used to people checking to see who he was. "Nathan Cross." He let the name land without decoration. He didn't extend his hand. "And you are?" Ryan's expression shifted in a way that would have been invisible to most people. Nathan caught it immediately. The microsecond of recognition, the rapid recalculation. Ryan Delaney knew exactly who Nathan Cross was. Ryan Delaney. A beat. I heard what you were doing." Nathan's voice didn't change. It stayed even, almost pleasant, which was somehow worse than anger. "She's with me tonight." The three words dropped into the room like stones into still water. Emily went completely still beside him. Ryan's jaw moved slightly. "Excuse me?" "She's with me," Nathan repeated, simpler the second time. "Which means, whatever this is," he gestured mildly at the scattered mess on the floor, at the watching crowd, at Ryan's entire performance, "is finished." Ryan looked from Nathan to Emily and back again. The recalculating expression returned and then collapsed into something thinner. A man with fewer social instincts might have pushed back. Ryan Delaney, Nathan noted, was not that man. He was stupid in the way that cruel people sometimes are, stupid about consequences. But he was smart enough to recognize when a room had shifted. "Fine," Ryan adjusted his cufflinks, which was the universal gesture of a man pretending he'd chosen to walk away. It was nothing anyway. He moved off into the crowd. Around them, the room exhaled and went back to its own performance, the way crowds always do. Discrete clusters of conversation re-establishing themselves, champagne glasses lifting again, the moment already being edited into something smaller and more manageable in everyone's memory. Emily Carter stood very still, holding her broken tray. Nathan looked at her. She was not particularly beautiful in the way this room defined beautiful. Not polished, not arranged. Her uniform had a small stain near the collar that predated whatever Ryan Delaney had done tonight. She had the look of someone who had been awake for too many hours and was running on something quieter and more stubborn than energy. Her eyes, when they met his, were brown and currently cycling through at least 4 different emotions in rapid succession. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know." "I don't know you." Also true. She looked down at the tray. "He's going to say you humiliated him." He humiliated himself. Nathan reached out and carefully took the tray from her hands. She was still holding a shard of glass without seeming to realize it. "You're bleeding." Emily looked down at her left palm. A thin line of red had appeared across the base of her fingers. "Oh." She seemed genuinely surprised by it. I didn't even feel that." "There's a first aid station near the coat check, through the east corridor." She looked at him. "I have to finish my shift." "You have a cut on your hand." "It's not deep." He held her gaze for a moment. She didn't look away, which he respected. "Let someone wrap it," he said. 5 minutes. The shift will survive." The east corridor was quieter. The sound from the ballroom filtered through as a low hum. Conversation and a string quartet playing something Nathan couldn't identify and probably wouldn't have recognized anyway. He was not particularly musical. Emily sat on a low bench near the coat check while a venue staff member, a young man named Marcus according to his badge, cleaned the cut on her palm with practiced efficiency. Nathan stood a few feet away because standing next to her would have felt like hovering, and he was working to avoid that. "You don't have to stay," Emily said, not looking up from her hand. "I know. Is that your answer for everything?" "When it's accurate." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. Why did you help me? And don't say you know why I know why. I'm serious. Men like you don't just... She stopped herself, started again. People in that room don't do what you just did. Nathan thought about that for a moment. He could give her the clean answer, the one that sounded composed and self-aware. He found that he didn't particularly want to. Because it was wrong, he said, and because no one else was going to. Emily looked at him then. Her expression was not soft. It was the expression of someone who has learned to verify things before trusting them. How do you know Ryan? She asked. I don't. Then how did you know his name? He said it when I introduced myself. A beat. You looked like you knew him. Something moved across her face. We dated. 2 years. I ended it 8 months ago. Nathan didn't ask why. He'd learned a long time ago that the second someone explains they ended something, they've already told you the part that matters. I'm sorry, he said. Don't be. I'm not. She flexed her newly wrapped hand experimentally. I'm sorry you got involved in it. I offered. You didn't know what you were offering to get into. No, he agreed. I rarely do. Marcus, the coat check attendant, moved quietly back to his station, pretending with professional courtesy not to have heard any of this. Emily stood up from the bench. She squared her shoulders in the way of someone who makes this particular gesture very often, not dramatically, but functionally, the way you roll your neck when it's tight. A small private reset. I need to get back, she said. Of course. She took 2 steps toward the ballroom and then stopped, turned back. Emily Carter, she said. It took Nathan a second to realize she was introducing herself. Nathan Cross. I know. A pause. Thank you, Nathan Cross. I mean it. She walked back into the noise and the light and the 250 people who hadn't noticed her until Ryan Delaney decided to make sure they did. Nathan watched her go. He stood in the corridor for a moment longer than necessary, which was also unusual for him. He was, by both temperament and practice, a man who moved efficiently from one thing to the next. He didn't linger. He lingered. He found her again 40 minutes later entirely by accident, or at least that's what he told himself. He'd stepped onto the East Terrace for air. The room had gotten warm the way these events always did past 10 o'clock, and she was standing near the railing alone, looking out at the city below. She'd set down her tray on a service cart near the door. Her hands were clasped in front of her. She wasn't crying. He would have retreated immediately if she'd been crying. She was just looking at the city with the focused expression of someone thinking something through very carefully. He almost turned around. You can come out here, she said, without turning. I can see your reflection in the glass. Nathan stepped onto the terrace. The cold hit immediately. He'd been right about the draft from the east side, though tonight it was worse than usual, the kind of January cold that finds the gaps in your coat and sits there. Emily apparently didn't feel it, or was choosing not to. He told everyone I was sleeping with his business partner, she said, still looking at the city. Matter of fact, the way you say something when you've been sitting with it long enough that the shock has worn off. That's why he was here tonight. He knew I'd be working this event. He planned it. Nathan didn't say anything. Some things only ask for listening. He's been doing things like this for 8 months, small things, telling people things, showing up places. She paused. Tonight was the first time he did it publicly. Have you spoken to anyone, police, or... He hasn't done anything technically illegal. She turned around then, leaning her back against the railing, arms crossed against the cold she was now apparently allowing herself to feel. He's just making sure that anywhere I go, the story gets there first. Nathan thought about Ryan Delaney's face in the moment he'd said the name Nathan Cross. The rapid recalculation. He won't be back tonight, Nathan said. Emily looked at him. You're very sure about that? He understood what I was saying when I said it. She studied him for a moment with those dark, assessing eyes. What exactly were you saying? That there would be consequences. You don't know me. I said that already. But you... She stopped. Something shifted in her expression. Not warmth exactly, more like someone adjusting a calibration, a reassessment. Most people would have looked away, she said. It's easier. Yes. So why didn't you? Nathan had thought about this question, in some form, for the 40 minutes between the coat check corridor and the East Terrace. He had not arrived at an answer that sounded good. He had arrived at one that sounded true. I've watched a lot of people look away in rooms like that, he said, including myself. I got tired of it. Emily Carter was quiet for a moment. Below them, the city moved the way it always moved at this hour, steady and indifferent, the lights doing their patient work against the dark. I have 2 more hours on this shift, she finally said. I know. I work the morning breakfast at the cafe on Dunmore Street tomorrow at 6. That's early. It's always early. She pushed herself off the railing and picked up her tray. You should go back in. You're going to freeze in that tuxedo. She was right. He was already cold. Emily? She paused at the door. He wasn't sure why he said her name. He hadn't planned what came after it. You handled yourself in there. I want you to know that. She didn't answer for a second. I didn't feel like I handled anything, she said quietly. That's usually how it feels when you do. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she went back inside. Nathan stayed on the terrace a while longer, in the January cold, looking at the city. He was not thinking about the rest of his evening. He was not thinking about the foundation board meeting on Tuesday or the quarterly reports his assistant had sent at 7:30 that he still hadn't read. He was not thinking about the drive home or the gala's auction or Gerald Fitch's avalanche. He was thinking about a woman with a cut on her palm and a 2-hour shift and a 6 o'clock morning that was going to come very fast. And he was thinking, in the particular way that quiet men think about things they aren't ready to name yet, that tonight had not ended the way he'd expected it to. He had not expected it to end with him wanting to know what came next, but it did. The morning after this gala, Nathan Cross woke up at 5:43 and lay in the dark for 17 minutes doing nothing. This was unusual. He was not a man who lay in the dark. He was a man who woke up, checked his phone, made coffee, reviewed the overnight emails from the Foundation's East Coast office, and was dressed and functional before 6:15. This had been his routine for 4 years, ever since Sophie had died and the alternative to routine had turned out to be something he couldn't afford to look at directly. But this morning he lay there, and what he thought about was not the board meeting or the quarterly reports or the 12 unread messages on his phone. He thought about a woman on a terrace in January, arms crossed against the cold she'd been too stubborn to acknowledge, looking at the city like it owed her an explanation. At 6:01, he got up. He did not go to the cafe on Dunmore Street. He was clear about that with himself. He made his coffee, read the overnight emails, and told himself that whatever the previous night had been, it was finished. A brief intersection. 2 people in a hallway, and then a terrace, and then the cold, and then nothing. It happened. It was over. He believed this for approximately 4 days. Then his assistant, Diane, walked into his office on Thursday morning with a look on her face that he'd learned, over 7 years of working together, to associate with news she expected him not to like. The Maplewood Bakery called, she said, setting a coffee on his desk with the careful precision of someone placing an object near a sleeping animal. They said they're no longer interested in the Foundation's local vendor partnership. Nathan looked up from the report he hadn't actually been reading. We've been in talks with Maplewood for 3 months. I know. Did they say why? Diane set a printed page next to his coffee. It was a screenshot of a social media post, something Ryan Delaney had apparently put up 2 nights ago. Nathan read it in about 12 seconds. It was written in the careful language of implication rather than accusation, the kind of post a person writes when they want maximum damage with minimum legal exposure. It referenced certain individuals pursuing proximity to powerful men under professional pretenses. It named no names. It didn't need to. Several people had tagged the Maplewood Bakery in the replies. One of them had mentioned that Emily Carter worked their morning shift. Nathan set the page down. Do we know her? Diane asked carefully. She was working the gala Saturday night. Diane was quiet for a moment in the way of someone connecting things. Ah. Pull up everything we have on the community cafe proposal, Nathan said. The Harrington Foundation's been sitting on that initiative for 8 months. I want to know why. Diane picked up her notepad. The proposal's been tabled because we haven't found the right person to run it. The foundation wants someone with actual hospitality and community outreach experience, not another administrator with a business degree. Nathan looked at her. She looked back at him. "I'll pull the file," she said. He didn't call Emily. He had no way to call Emily. What he did was drive to the cafe on Dunmore Street on Friday morning at 7:45, which he told himself was practical rather than anything else, because the cafe was 4 blocks from his attorney's office, and he had a 9 o'clock meeting, and it was a reasonable place to get coffee. It was not a reasonable place to get coffee. It was a narrow, slightly worn breakfast counter with 8 stools and 3 small tables and a handwritten menu board that changed daily, and a line out the door that suggested the neighborhood had long since figured out something the rest of the city hadn't. He waited in line. He was in a coat that cost more than most people's monthly rent, standing between a woman with a stroller and a man in paint-stained work clothes reading something on his phone, and no one looked at him twice, which he found unexpectedly relieving. Emily was behind the counter. She was moving the way people move when they've done something so many times it's become a kind of muscle memory. Efficient, automatic, but not careless. She was taking an order, filling a coffee, passing a paper bag across the counter, all in a sequence that would have looked chaotic to someone who didn't know what they were watching and looked like choreography to someone who did. She saw him when he reached the counter. Her expression did a brief, complicated thing and then settled. "Black coffee," he said, "and whatever's good." "Everything's good." A pause. "The sourdough's better." Then the sourdough. She poured the coffee herself, which she didn't need to do. There were 2 other people working the counter. She set it in front of him and leaned on the counter slightly, the posture of someone who has approximately 45 seconds before the next thing needs doing and is choosing to use them. "You looked me up," she said. Not an accusation, just a statement. "Your name was on the gala roster, and you're here because I heard about Maplewood." Something moved through her face, brief and controlled, but there. "It's fine," she said. "It's not fine." Nathan. She said his name with the patience of someone who has already processed something he was still arriving at. "I've dealt with worse. I'll find another job." "I know you will." He wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. It was warm, and the cafe was warm, and outside it was still January and cold. "I want to offer you something else." She looked at him steadily. "Okay." The Harrington Foundation has been trying to launch a community cafe initiative for almost a year. They have the funding, they have the location, a space on Callaway Street near the Riverside neighborhood, and they have no one to run it. Someone with actual hospitality experience. Someone who understands what a neighborhood needs. Emily was quiet. "I'm not offering you charity," he said, because he could see the sentence forming behind her eyes, and he wanted to be ahead of it. "I'm offering you a job, a real one, with a real scope and a real salary and real work attached to it. The foundation needs what you know how to do. That's the beginning and end of it. I don't know anything about running a foundation initiative. You know how to run a kitchen. You know how to build the thing that makes a space feel like somewhere people want to be. The administrative side is learnable." A beat. "And Diane, my assistant, will make your life considerably easier." Emily looked at him for a long moment. Behind her, the morning rush was building. She could hear it in the shift of voices, the small sounds of people arriving and ordering and existing. She didn't turn around. "Why?" she said. He'd expected the question. He still didn't have a clean answer for it. "Because Ryan Delaney is punishing you for leaving him, and nobody's stopping him, and I can do something about that." He paused. "And because the cafe initiative genuinely needs someone, and I think you're genuinely the person." "Those are 2 different reasons." "Yes." "Which one is the real one?" "Both." She looked at him a beat longer. Then she straightened up because the line behind him had grown and she was, above everything else, someone who did her job. "Come back Monday," she said. "After the morning rush, 9:30. We can talk." She moved away down the counter before he could answer. He sat with his coffee and his sourdough and listened to the cafe do its work around him, and thought that he had not sat in a place like this, uncomplicated, warm, functional, in a very long time. Monday came. They talked. And then Tuesday. They talked again, this time at the Callaway Street space, which was empty and cold and smelled like old paint and had good bones and terrible lighting and a kitchen that needed equipment but had a lot of room. Emily walked the space with the focused attention of someone reading a room's potential the way other people read text. She didn't say much. She stopped in the middle of the main floor, turned slowly, looked up at the ceiling. Families, she said. What? This neighborhood, Riverside. It's mostly working families and older residents. The cafe initiatives I've seen, the foundation ones, the grant-funded ones, they always design for young professionals. Good coffee, fast Wi-Fi, exposed brick. She looked at him. That's not what this neighborhood needs. What does it need? Long tables. The kind where you can sit with a kid and help with homework. Affordable lunch. Maybe a program where the elementary school kids can come in the afternoon. She paused. A place to be, not just a place to pass through. Nathan said nothing. He was writing something on his phone. What are you doing? Emily asked. Sending this to the foundation's program director. He looked up. Keep going. She did. For 40 minutes, she walked the space and described what she saw in it. Not what she wanted exactly, but what the neighborhood might. She was specific and unsentimental, and occasionally wrong in ways she was willing to be corrected on, and Nathan noticed that she did not qualify everything she said with apologies, which was rarer than it should have been. When they were done, she stood at the front window looking out at Callaway Street, which was quiet at 10 in the morning, except for a woman with a grocery cart and two men talking outside the laundromat next door. If I take this, she said, I need you to understand something. Okay. I earn it, every part of it. I'm not somebody's charity case, and I'm not somebody's project, and if at any point this job exists because you feel bad for me rather than because I'm the right person for it, I walk out. She turned from the window. Her expression was very direct. I've had enough of men deciding what I need. That's fair, Nathan said. I mean it. I know you do. He held her gaze. For what it's worth, I wouldn't have come back to the cafe if I didn't think you were right for this. I have a foundation to run. I don't have time for projects. Something in her expression shifted. Not quite trust. A first step in its direction. Okay, she said. Okay. I'll take the meeting with the program director. A pause. That's not the same as saying yes. Understood. She took the meeting. She said yes. The first weeks were not easy, which Nathan had not promised they would be. The foundation's program director, a careful man named Arthur Wills, was supportive in the diplomatic way of someone who reserves judgment while maintaining the appearance of enthusiasm. The foundation's administrative structure was, as Emily described it to her younger sister Jade one evening over the phone, a filing system that someone built while having an argument with logic. The vendors she needed to contact had long relationships with existing foundation suppliers who were not thrilled about a new person renegotiating terms. The kitchen equipment the foundation had budgeted for was cheaper than what the space actually needed, and Emily spent 3 days making a case for the difference in a language she was still learning to speak. Nathan did not solve these things for her. He made introductions when she asked for them, answered questions when she brought them, and otherwise stayed out of it, which was harder than it sounded because he was not naturally a man who stayed out of things. What changed, quietly, was the rhythm of their days. They had coffee together on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because those were the mornings Nathan's schedule allowed for the walk from his office to the Callaway Street space. It started as site visits, practical and brief. It became something that neither of them named because naming it would have required an acknowledgement neither was ready to make. Emily learned that Nathan took his coffee too hot and drank it too fast and had the mild burned tongue situation that results from doing this regularly and refused to acknowledge it. Nathan learned that Emily got quiet when she was working through something difficult. Not the performative quiet of someone waiting to be asked, but the genuine kind that could last for 20 minutes before she surfaced with a solution or a question or sometimes just a small, tired exhale. He learned that she was funny, not in the broad social way of someone performing humor, but in the dry, sideways way of someone who notices things. One afternoon, she looked up from a vendor contract she'd been reading and said, without preamble, "This clause says the foundation is responsible for acts of ambient weather. What does that mean? Is there non-ambient weather?" He laughed. It surprised him. He didn't laugh easily in professional settings, which was not a choice he'd made but a habit he'd accumulated, and the sound of it in the empty cafe space felt slightly foreign. Emily had looked briefly pleased with herself, then returned to the contract. He brought Lily on a Saturday in late February. This was also not planned, or at least it wasn't planned the way he later felt it probably should have been. Lily was 7 years old and had her mother's hair and Nathan's habit of studying things carefully before she was willing to commit to an opinion about them. She was not, on that Saturday morning, supposed to be anywhere near Calloway Street. She was supposed to be at a birthday party for a girl from her class named Priya. Priya's party had apparently ended abruptly due to a misunderstanding involving cake and a small dog. And Nathan's Saturday had restructured itself around a 7-year-old who was not crying but was doing the particular thing she did when she was working hard not to cry. Very straight back, very careful breathing, eyes slightly too wide. His Saturday also included a meeting at the cafe space that he couldn't move. "You can come with me," he told her, "or I can call Mrs. Henley." Lily considered this with her characteristic thoroughness. "Where are you going?" "A cafe, the building kind, not the open one yet." "Is it boring?" "Probably not completely." She came. Emily was already there when they arrived, standing in the kitchen space with a contractor named Pete, looking at a section of shelving that was apparently the source of a disagreement both of them were maintaining with great politeness. She looked up when Nathan came in. Her eyes moved to Lily, and her expression did something brief and careful. "I'm sorry," Nathan said. "Change of plan. I can do this another—" "No, it's fine." Emily crouched down to Lily's eye level with the natural ease of someone who'd been around children enough not to make a production of it. "Hi, I'm Emily." Lily studied her. "My dad says this is a cafe." "It will be. Right now it's mostly a room with good intentions." Lily looked around the space, the half-installed shelving, the contractor's equipment cases, the morning light coming through the front windows in long rectangles across the unfinished floor. "What kind of cafe?" "The kind where families can come, where kids can do homework." Emily tilted her head slightly. "What kind of cafe would you want?" Lily thought about this seriously. "One with really good hot chocolate and chairs that aren't uncomfortable." "Both excellent requirements." Emily straightened up. "I'll put them on the list." Lily processed this. Then she walked carefully toward the window, apparently deciding the conversation was concluded to her satisfaction. Nathan looked at Emily, who was already turning back to Pete and the shelving question. He stood in the doorway of that unfinished room for a moment, watching his daughter press her palm flat against the winter light coming through the glass, watching Emily argue cheerfully with a contractor about load-bearing capacity, and felt something that he hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness, exactly. That word had always seemed too light for what he meant. Something more like weight returning to something that had been too empty for too long. Something settling back into place. He didn't name it. It was too soon to name it, and he was not a man who named things before he was ready. But it was there. That afternoon when they were leaving and Lily was ahead of them on the sidewalk, stepping deliberately over the cracks in the pavement with the focused concentration of someone playing a private game, Emily walked beside him for a moment in silence. "She's lovely," Emily said. "She's 7 and terrifying." Emily smiled. Actually smiled. Not the controlled professional version he'd learned to recognize as her public face, but the real one that came from somewhere less guarded. It arrived without warning, and it changed her whole expression, and Nathan looked away before she could notice him noticing. "She asked me," Lily announced without turning around, still stepping over cracks, "if the hot chocolate was going to be the kind with those little marshmallows, or the real kind." "What did you say?" Nathan asked Emily. Emily considered. "I said both." Lily seemed to find this acceptable. She continued down the sidewalk. Nathan walked beside Emily in the pale February cold, and neither of them said anything for another half a block, and it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that two people share when they are beginning, slowly, to feel like they don't have to fill the space between them with words. Which was, for both of them, something they had not had in a very long time. Emily told her sister about it that night on the phone. Not all of it. Emily was not the kind of person who told people all of anything. She rationed her interior life with the same practicality she applied to everything else. But she told Jade that the job was real, that the space was coming together, that Nathan's daughter had opinions about hot chocolate that Emily found reasonable. "Emily," Jade said, in the tone of a younger sister who has learned exactly how much editorial space she is permitted, "he drove to the cafe to offer me a job. Nobody drives to a cafe at 7:45 in the morning to offer someone a job. He had an attorney meeting." Emily. Jade. A pause on the line. "I'm just saying," Jade said more carefully, "that not everyone who does something nice is Ryan." Emily didn't answer right away. Outside her apartment window, the city moved through its evening routines. Headlights and foot traffic and the particular urban quiet that sets in around 9 o'clock on a weeknight when people have stopped going places and started staying in them. "I know that," she said finally. "Do you?" "I'm working on it," which was, for Emily Carter, as close to an admission as she was going to make on a Tuesday night in February. But it was honest, and it was something. March came in cold and stayed that way. The cafe on Calloway Street was 6 weeks from its soft opening, which meant Emily was living on 4 hours of sleep and contractor timelines, and the particular anxiety of someone who has committed to a thing and is now discovering all the ways a thing can go sideways before it is finished. The kitchen equipment had arrived 3 days late. One of the vendors she'd negotiated with pulled out citing what he called reputational concerns, which was a phrase that meant nothing and meant everything. The shelving Pete had installed was 2 inches off from the original plan, which shouldn't have mattered and somehow mattered enormously at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night when Emily was standing alone in the empty space trying to figure out if she could live with it. She couldn't live with it. She called Pete at 11:15, apologized for the hour, and they talked it through for 20 minutes and arrived at a solution that added 2 days and not much cost. By the time she hung up, she was sitting on the floor of the unfinished cafe in her coat, back against the wall beneath the too close shelving, eating a granola bar that had been in her bag since Tuesday. This was her life in March. It was not glamorous. It was frequently inconvenient. She wouldn't have traded it. What she didn't know on that Wednesday night on the floor of the Calloway Street space was that March was also the month Ryan Delaney decided to stop being subtle. She found out on a Thursday. Not from Ryan. Not directly. She found out from Jade, who called at 7 in the morning while Emily was in the middle of a vendor call and left a voicemail that said simply, "Call me before you look at anything online. I mean it. Call me first." Emily called her back. "There's a piece," Jade said. "Not a news piece, a blog, one of those gossip sites. Someone fed them a story." "What kind of story?" A pause. "The kind where you're pursuing Nathan for his money, where the whole cafe job is a scheme, where—" Jade stopped. "He told them about Nathan's wife, that you're trying to replace her, that Nathan's too grief-stricken to see what's happening." Emily sat very still in her car, which was where she'd taken the call. "He used Sophie," she said. "I'm so sorry, Em." Emily looked through the windshield at Calloway Street doing its morning routine. The laundromat owner unlocking his door, a woman pushing a stroller, 2 kids from the elementary school half a block up running ahead of their mother. Normal, ordinary, indifferent to her. "How bad is it?" she asked. "It's been shared a lot. Some people with bigger accounts picked it up." A beat. "Someone tagged the foundation." "Okay," Emily said. "That's it? Okay. What else am I supposed to say?" "You're supposed to be upset." "I am upset." Her voice was very even. "That's what it sounds like when I'm upset." She did not call Nathan. She told herself this was practical. He would see it, or Diane would flag it for him, and there was no version of her calling him first that didn't feel like asking for something. She had been very careful these past weeks about what she asked for from Nathan Cross. Careful the way you are careful around something that matters more than you've admitted to yourself. He called her at 9:15. "I've seen it," she said, before he could say anything. "Emily, It's Ryan. We both know it's Ryan. The site won't say who gave them the story, but it doesn't take a lot of investigation. I know. A pause. I want to put out a statement from me, from the foundation, something that addresses this directly. She waited. I want to push back publicly, he said. Okay. I mean, I'll call the communications team today. We can get something drafted by Nathan. She kept her voice quiet. Is this you asking me or telling me? A silence. Asking, he said. It's your name in this. It's your call. Then, yes, do the statement. She paused. Don't make it about me specifically. Make it about the foundation's hiring process. Make it factual. Don't make it emotional. That gives them more to work with. Yeah, that's right. Another pause. Are you okay? She looked at the granola bar wrapper still in the cup holder from last night. Small, stupid evidence of ordinary life continuing. I've been worse, she said. This was true. This was not the same as fine. So, the foundation's communications director was a woman named Patricia Chen, who had managed public relations crises of various magnitudes for 11 years and had the particular stillness of someone who has stopped being surprised by what people are capable of. She drafted a statement in 2 hours. It was measured, factual, and left no visible angles for escalation. Nathan read it. He approved it. It went out Friday afternoon. By Friday evening, the original piece had more shares than the foundation's statement. This was how these things worked. Emily knew this. It didn't make it easier to watch. What made it harder, what she hadn't anticipated, was the silence from Nathan over the weekend. Not complete silence. He texted Saturday morning to ask how she was doing. She said fine, which was the text equivalent of what she'd said on the phone. He responded with okay, and then nothing until Sunday evening, when he sent a link to a recipe for the banana bread she'd mentioned wanting to try at the cafe, which was such a specifically Nathan thing to do that she sat looking at it for a long time. She texted back, thanks. Making the case to Pete that we need a second oven. He sent a thumbs up. Monday came. Their usual Tuesday coffee didn't happen. Nathan had a board meeting that ran long, and Emily had a contractor walkthrough that did the same, and by the time both were done, it was after 7 and the day was finished. She told herself it was scheduling. Most of it was scheduling. But there was something different in Nathan in the days that followed the story's publication. Something slightly more measured, more careful. The kind of careful that reads, to someone paying attention, less like caution and more like retreat. She noticed. She filed it. She did not address it, because addressing it would have required saying something she wasn't certain she had the right to say. The piece got picked up by a larger outlet on the following Wednesday. This one had a photograph. Not a new one. It was a photo from a foundation event 2 weeks prior, one Emily hadn't even known was being taken. It showed Nathan and Emily standing at the entrance to the Callaway Street space, talking. In isolation, in a hallway, it could have been read any number of ways. The outlet chose the most specific one and wrote a caption under it that was technically a question and functionally a statement. Nathan saw it at 6 in the morning. Emily saw it at 6:45 when she was already on the bus to Callaway Street, and the notification came through on her phone and the headline was right there on the screen, and the woman sitting next to her was reading the same site, and Emily watched her scroll past it without recognition and thought, this is what exposure feels like, and it doesn't care whether you're ready. She called Diane. I'm trying to reach him, Diane said, which meant Nathan hadn't picked up yet, which was unusual. It's fine, Emily said. I don't need to reach him. I just wanted to flag it. Emily, Diane's voice was careful. Diane had never used her first name before without a professional prefix. For what it's worth, the people who work closely with Nathan, who've known him a long time, not one of us believes a word of this. Emily looked out the bus window at the city going past. That means something, she said. Thank you. She hung up and watched 2 more stops go by and thought about what it meant that the people around Nathan believed in her and what it meant that Nathan himself had gone quiet. She got her answer, the kind she hadn't wanted, on Thursday afternoon. She was at the cafe space reviewing the menu board layout with a designer named Leo when her phone buzzed with a news alert. It was a local media outlet, small but connected enough. They'd reached out to Nathan's communications team for comment on the ongoing questions surrounding the foundation's newest hire. The communications team had provided a statement. It was, word for word, the same statement they'd issued the previous Friday. Not a new statement, not a personal one, not Nathan's voice, his actual voice, the one that had said, "She's with me in a ballroom in January with no hesitation and no calculation, just a decision made in the space of a breath." The recycled statement. Emily read it twice. Then she set her phone face down on the table and finished the conversation with Leo about the menu board placement, which took another 20 minutes. Leo noticed something was different, but was professional enough not to say so. When Leo left, Emily stood alone in the space she had spent 3 months building into something she was proud of. The shelving was fixed now. The kitchen was equipped. The long tables she'd specified, the ones for families, for kids with homework, for people who needed somewhere to be, were arriving next week. The light in the afternoon came through the front windows and hit the floor in a way that was genuinely beautiful, even though Emily would not have described it that way. She picked up her phone. She called Nathan. He answered on the second ring. "I saw the statement," she said. "I know. Patricia thought—" "Nathan." She stopped him, not harshly, but clearly. "It's okay. I understand." A silence on the line. "It's your foundation," she said. "Your family's name, this kind of attention. I understand why you're managing it carefully." "Emily, I need you to tell me the truth." She sat down on one of the folding chairs Leo had left out. The space was quiet around her, the particular quiet of a room that's almost finished. "Is there any part of you that's not sure about any of this? The cafe, me here, what it looks like?" The silence that followed was a second too long. Not by much. 1 second, maybe less. But Emily had spent 2 years with a man who used silences the way other people used words, and she had learned to read what lived inside them. "I'm not sure about a lot of things," Nathan said carefully. "That's honest." She looked at her hands. The scar from the broken glass at the gala was mostly faded now, just a thin, pale line at the base of her fingers. "I appreciate that. Emily, this isn't— I'm going to resign," she said. "Not because of the story, not because of Ryan, because—" She stopped. Started again. "Because I told you at the beginning that I would walk out if I ever thought the job existed out of sympathy rather than merit. And I don't think that's where we are. But I also told you I'd walk if the balance shifted, and something shifted." "Nothing shifted." "Something shifted, Nathan." Her voice was gentle and unmoving. "I can hear it." Another silence. This one he didn't try to fill. "The cafe doesn't need me for the next stage," she said. "The systems are in place. Arthur Wills can manage the soft opening with the team. I'll write a full transition document this week." A pause. "I'll do it properly. I'm not burning anything down on my way out." "Emily." His voice had something in it she hadn't heard before. Something thinned out. "I don't want you to go." "I know. Then wanting someone to stay isn't the same as being willing to stand next to them." She said it without anger, without accusation, the way you say a thing that's simply true. "You were willing to do that in January, in that ballroom. You didn't think about it. You just did it. And somewhere between then and now—" She stopped. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. She heard him exhale on the other end of the line, a long, unsteady sound from a man who was very practiced at appearing steady. "I'll have the transition document ready by end of next week," she said. "The cafe is going to be great, Nathan. It really is. You chose the right neighborhood, and the team is good." "Emily, take care of Lily," she said. And she meant it completely. Meant it without agenda, without bitterness, with the full weight of someone who had watched that little girl press her palm against winter light and ask serious questions about hot chocolate and grown genuinely, inconveniently fond of her. She ended the call. She sat in the quiet of the cafe for a while. The afternoon light moved across the floor in the way it did, slow and indifferent and genuinely beautiful. She sat with it. Then she picked up her bag, put on her coat, and walked out with her back straight and her head up, which was the only way Emily Carter knew how to leave anything. Shit. The grand opening was scheduled for the following Saturday. Emily had put it in motion, had designed every piece of it, and she was not going to be there, which was its own particular kind of loss. She learned about the morning from Jade, who followed the foundation's social media and provided a running commentary that Emily had asked her to stop twice and hadn't actually meant either time. "There's a lot of people," Jade reported at 10:15 that Saturday morning. "Like a real line. The elementary school sent kids. Someone brought a dog. The dog shouldn't be inside." "Emily, I'm just saying." "Nathan's there," Jade said, more carefully. "His dad, too, apparently. The foundation's whole board. And some press." Emily was in her apartment. She had made coffee and was sitting at her kitchen table with a legal pad she had been using to make a list of things she needed to do, which had devolved after the first 3 items into a series of small, purposeless drawings in the margin. A cup. A window. A very small bird she had no explanation for. "I hope it goes well," she said. And she meant that too. She was drawing a second small bird when Jade called back 11 minutes later. Her voice was different. "Something happened," Jade said. "Nathan's father. I'm seeing tweets. People are saying he collapsed. Or not collapsed. Something happened on the steps outside. There are reporters there, Em. A lot of cameras." Emily was already standing. "Where on Callaway?" she asked. "The front. There are photos." Emily was already moving toward the door. She didn't think about it. She did not sit at her kitchen table and weigh the variables and consider what showing up would look like, or whether it was appropriate or what it meant about her and Nathan and everything that had cracked open between them last Thursday on the phone. She thought about none of that. She put on her coat and she left. Callaway Street was 11 minutes from her apartment on foot, and she walked fast. She heard the crowd before she saw it, the particular murmur of a large group of people in the presence of something wrong. There was a semicircle of people on the sidewalk in front of the cafe's entrance, and 3 camera crews at different angles, and Emily moved through the outside edge of the crowd without thinking about how she got there. Richard Cross was sitting on the front steps. He was 71 years old and had the bearing of a man who had spent his entire life filling rooms, and right now he was sitting on concrete steps in January cold, looking like the room had gotten very small, very fast. His face was gray. His hands were shaking with the fine, particular tremor of someone whose nervous system was doing something his conscious mind was not keeping up with. Nathan was crouched next to him, one hand on his father's shoulder, talking to him in a low voice. But Richard's eyes were not quite focused, and his breathing was visible from 10 feet away, shallow and fast and wrong. A woman who appeared to be a foundation publicist was attempting to redirect the camera crews. She was not succeeding. Emily reached the steps. Nathan looked up and saw her, and his expression did something complicated and unfinished. She didn't look at him. She looked at Richard. She sat down on the step beside the older man, right next to him, close enough that their arms were touching, and she said quietly and without drama, "Mr. Cross, my name is Emily. I ran this cafe. Can you look at me?" Richard's eyes found her. They were blue and currently very uncertain, which was at odds with everything she'd heard about the man who'd built the Harrington Foundation from a mid-sized family charity into a regional institution. "I don't need a fuss," he said. His voice was thin. "Good. I'm not making one." She kept her voice low and even, the same register she used when the morning rush hit a wall and she needed the kitchen to stay calm. "Can you breathe with me for a second, just slow, in through your nose?" He looked at her like she might be slightly ridiculous. "Humor me," she said. He breathed in through his nose. "Good. Hold it. Now out." She demonstrated. Slow, deliberate, unhurried. Again. The cameras were still going. She was aware of that peripherally, and she did not care, which was a thing she would think about later. How simply she did not care about the cameras in that moment, because the cameras were not the thing that needed attending to. Richard Cross breathed. Once, twice, 3 times. His hands didn't stop shaking immediately, but his eyes came into better focus. The gray in his face shifted slightly toward something closer to his actual color. "Thank you," he said. Low, private, real. "Don't mention it." She stayed where she was. She didn't get up, because moving away too fast was the wrong thing. "This is a good step to sit on. Good concrete. Solid." He almost laughed. It came out as a rough exhale, but it was in the family of laughter. Nathan told me about you, Richard said. Emily glanced briefly at Nathan, who was still crouched on the other side of his father, and whose expression she still couldn't fully read. Good things, I hope, she said to Richard. He said you were difficult, Richard said. He's not wrong. He said that like it was a compliment. Emily looked at Nathan then, properly looked at him, the way she hadn't allowed herself to in weeks. He was looking back at her with the expression of a man who has just watched something happen that he should have expected and somehow still didn't. She looked away. An EMT appeared at the edge of the crowd. Someone had called, sensibly, and Emily stood up and stepped back and let the professionals do their work, because that was also part of knowing what a moment needed. She was moving back toward the edge of the crowd when one of the camera operators shifted and a reporter she didn't recognize stepped into her path. Young woman, recorder in hand, the bright-eyed focus of someone who has spotted a story's center of gravity. "Are you Emily Carter?" the reporter asked. Emily looked at the recorder, looked at the reporter. "I'm nobody," she said pleasantly. "Excuse me." She moved past her and kept walking, and behind her Calloway Street continued its morning with the indifferent vitality of a neighborhood that had been waiting a long time for something like this cafe to exist, and was now, cautiously, beginning to believe in it. The video appeared online before the afternoon was over. Not the reporter's footage. She'd gotten nothing useful from Emily and had moved on to safer angles. What appeared was a clip from someone's phone. 37 seconds, slightly shaky, shot from the edge of the crowd on Calloway Street. It showed a woman sitting down next to an older man on concrete steps and talking to him quietly while cameras pressed in from 3 directions. The woman's back was mostly to the phone. You couldn't clearly see her face. What you could see was the way she sat. Not positioned, not performing concern, just present. The way a person is present when they are genuinely focused on the only thing in front of them. The clip had 40,000 views by 2 o'clock. By 5, a local news segment had picked it up. By Sunday morning, it had cleared 200,000, and the comment section had developed the particular temperature of a crowd that has collectively decided something, which was that the woman on the steps was not what the tabloids had said she was. Emily did not see most of this in real time. She was at Jade's apartment Sunday, helping her younger sister pack up her room for the move to the college dormitory that would happen in 3 weeks. This was practical, physical work, boxes and tape, and the particular archaeology of a younger sibling's room that has accumulated years of overlapping phases. And Emily was grateful for it. Her hands needed something to do. "You're trending," Jade said from inside the closet where she was determining the fate of a collection of graphic t-shirts she'd outgrown emotionally, if not physically. "I'm not trending. A video of someone from behind is trending. It's obviously you." "They don't know that." "Emily, about 6,000 people have now tagged the foundation identifying you by the back of your head." Jade considered the shirt. "This is going in the donation pile, right?" "That's your call." "I'm asking what you think." "Keep it," Emily said. "You paid for that camp with your own babysitting money. You cried for 2 days before you left because you were scared and you went anyway." Jade looked at the shirt for a moment. Then she put it in the keep pile. She was quiet for a beat. "He's going to come find you," Jade said. "Nathan." Emily pulled another box toward her. "Maybe." "Not maybe. He will." Jade sat on the edge of her bare mattress. "The question is what you're going to say." "I don't know yet." "That's not like you." "No," Emily agreed. "It isn't." Nathan Cross spent the Saturday of the opening doing 3 things in sequence. First, he made sure his father was all right. Richard Cross had been evaluated by the EMTs on scene and then examined by his cardiologist by early afternoon, and the diagnosis was not a heart attack. It was a severe panic attack, the kind that arrives without warning in people who have been quietly managing a great deal of stress for a long time and have not told anyone about the managing. Richard was given instructions, a prescription adjustment, and a look from his cardiologist that communicated more than the official guidance. He was home by 2. He was irritated about the fuss, which Nathan recognized as the surest sign that he was going to be fine. Second, Nathan watched the video on his phone. He watched it 4 times. The 4th time, he set his phone face down on the kitchen table and sat there for a while. Third, he called Patricia Chen. "I need you to put together a board meeting," he said. "This week. Emergency session if necessary." Nathan, Patricia paused. Can I ask what for? I'm going to make a statement, he said. A real one this time. Another pause. Define real. Personal. On the record. My name attached to it. Not the foundation's name, not the communications department. Mine. Patricia was quiet for a moment in the way of someone mentally repositioning several things at once. This is about Emily Carter. It's about several things. She's one of them. Nathan. Her voice was careful, not resistant. Patricia had not survived 11 years of this work by being resistant to the decisions people had already made. She was careful the way a good navigator is careful, pointing out what the road looks like ahead. If you do this personally, it becomes a personal story. The media attention doesn't go down, it shifts. I know. It will invite follow-up, your family, Lily, Sophie, potentially. I know that too. A long pause. Okay, Patricia said. I'll make the calls. The emergency board meeting of the Harrington Foundation was held on Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock in the Foundation's main conference room on the 14th floor. 12 board members. Arthur Wills. Patricia. Diane, who sat in the back corner with her notepad and whose expression communicated nothing, which meant she was paying very close attention. Nathan did not use notes. He stood at the head of the table and he talked for 11 minutes, which he knew because he'd timed himself the night before, not to edit, but to understand how long it took to say what needed saying without padding it into something it wasn't. He said that Emily Carter had been hired by the Foundation on merit, specifically his assessment of her professional capabilities, and that any suggestion to the contrary was false. He said that the source of the stories about her was a documented pattern of harassment from a former partner, and that the Foundation had in its possession communications that established this clearly, which the Foundation's legal team was prepared to make available to any journalist who asked. He said that the Foundation had issued a generic statement in response to the initial story, and that this had been insufficient, and that the insufficiency was his decision, not Patricia's or the communications team's, and that he was correcting it now. Then he said the other part. I also want to be clear about something that goes beyond the Foundation's official position. He looked around the table. These were people he had known, some of them, for most of his adult life. Board members who had watched him become his father's successor, who had attended Sophie's funeral, who had known him in the particular way of people who occupy the same institutional orbit for years without ever quite having a real conversation. Emily Carter came to this foundation as a professional. She became something else. She became someone who walked into a space she'd just been pushed out of and sat down next to my father on a set of concrete steps and helped him breathe when he was scared, because that was what was needed, and she didn't wait to be asked. The room was very quiet. I allowed a situation to develop where she felt she had to choose between her dignity and her job, because I was managing the optics of our association instead of simply standing behind her. He paused. It was not a dramatic pause. It was the pause of someone choosing a word. That was wrong. I'm saying that in front of all of you because I said it to her privately, and that wasn't sufficient either. Arthur Wills was looking at the table. Patricia was looking at Nathan. Diane, in the back corner, had stopped writing. The Foundation will issue a full statement today under my name, Nathan said. If any board member has concerns about that decision, I'm available to discuss them after this meeting. That's everything. He sat down. Nobody asked for a discussion after the meeting. The statement went out at 2 o'clock Tuesday afternoon. It was 4 paragraphs. Nathan had written it himself at midnight the night before and sent it to Patricia not for editing but for legal review, which was a distinction she understood and respected. It was factual in the places where facts were what was needed and direct in the places where facts weren't enough. It named Ryan Delaney once, plainly. It described Emily's contributions to the Callaway Street project in specific terms, not effusively, not sentimentally, but with the precision of someone accounting for actual work that had been done. The last paragraph said, Ms. Carter's decision to step back from her role was her own, and I respect it. What I am not willing to respect is the suggestion that she came to this foundation for any reason other than what she has demonstrated every day since we began working together, which is a commitment to building something that matters. The record is clear on this. I am clear on this. I should have said so sooner. By 5 o'clock, the statement had been picked up by 3 outlets. By 7, Ryan Delaney's name was generating its own search volume, and not favorably. By 9, someone had compiled the timeline of the harassment, the Maplewood situation, the social media posts, the planted stories, into a thread that was circulating widely enough that Ryan's employer, a mid-sized investment firm on the north side, had issued a statement saying they were reviewing the matter. Emily read all of this on her couch in her apartment. She read it in the way of someone who has been waiting for something and is now sitting with the fact that it arrived and is uncertain how she feels about what comes next. Her phone had been buzzing since 2 o'clock. She had answered Jade, who was succinct and emotional in equal measure. She had answered Diane, who was professional and warm, and said only that she hoped Emily was well and that the cafe team had asked about her. She had not answered the 2 numbers she didn't recognize, which were probably journalists. She had not answered Nathan. He had called at 6:47. She'd seen his name on the screen and watched it ring and let it go to voicemail and then sat with the fact of that for a while. At 9:15, he texted, "I'm not asking you to call back tonight. I just want you to know that everything in the statement is true, and the part that matters most isn't in it." She read this 3 times. Then she set her phone on the coffee table and went to bed, which she knew was not a resolution, but was the most honest thing she could do, because she needed to sleep before she could think clearly, and she needed to think clearly before she said anything that mattered. She called him Wednesday morning at 7:40. He answered before the second ring. "Hi," he said. No preamble, just that. "Hi." She was standing in her kitchen with coffee she hadn't drunk yet. Outside, the city was doing its early morning inventory. "I read the statement." "I know. Diane told me you'd seen it." "Diane told you?" "She tracks media reach. Your name was in the analytics." A pause. "She also just told me. She's invested in this situation. She's a good person." "She is." He paused again. Not the long silences of 3 weeks ago. This one was different. The quality of it was different. "Emily, I want to say something and I want to say it right, which means I've been working on how to say it for about 4 days." "Okay." "I got scared," he said. "That's it. That's the thing underneath all of it. When the stories started, when the attention came, I've been managing my family's public image since I was 28 years old, and there's a reflex that kicks in that is about management and not about people, and I let it run instead of stopping it." A beat. "I let it run on you. You, specifically, who had done nothing except show up and work and be exactly who you said you were." Emily was quiet. "I've been thinking about January," he said. "The gala. I walked across that room because it was obvious what needed doing, and I didn't stop to think about what it would look like or who was watching. And then somewhere in the middle of March, I became a person who sent recycled press statements." He stopped. "I don't like that person very much." "He wasn't all bad," Emily said. "He texted me a banana bread recipe." A beat. Then something that sounded like a surprised exhale, the cousin of a laugh. "I stand behind the banana bread," he said. "It was a good recipe." She set down the coffee. "Nathan, I'm not punishing you. I want to be clear about that. I left because I needed to, and the statement you put out was—" She paused, looking for the right word. "It was the thing you should have done 3 weeks ago and didn't, and then you did it anyway. That counts." "Does it count enough?" She looked out her kitchen window. The morning was gray and slightly wet, one of those early spring days that hasn't committed to anything yet. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I think I need to see you in person before I know." "Okay?" His voice was immediate, no deliberation. "When?" "Not today. I need a day." "Thursday," he said. Not a question, an offer. "Thursday," she agreed. It. She got to the Callaway Street Cafe at 11 on Thursday. It was technically closed to the public. The soft opening had happened Saturday, and the regular hours were starting Monday. The door was unlocked, and the space was warm and smelled like the coffee they'd been testing in the new equipment, and the long tables were in place with their chairs around them, exactly where she'd specified. Nathan was already there. He was standing near the front window, which was where she'd first seen him standing in this space back in February, and he was wearing the particular expression of a man who has prepared for several possible versions of this conversation and is now aware that none of his preparations are going to be useful. Lily was sitting at one of the long tables. Emily stopped. Lily was doing something on paper, drawing, it looked like, with a set of markers that were spread across the table with the territorial confidence of a 7-year-old who has claimed a workspace. She looked up when Emily came in. "Dad said you might come today," Lily said. Emily looked at Nathan. He looked back. His expression said, "I know, I should have warned you. I'm sorry, and also I'm not." "Hey, Lily," Emily said. "I made something." Lily held up the paper without ceremony. It was a drawing of what appeared to be a cafe. Rough, colorful, the perspective cheerfully wrong in the way of a child who draws what she means rather than what she sees. There were long tables and small stick figures, and what appeared to be a very large mug. In the corner, in careful 7-year-old printing, the cafe with good hot chocolate. Emily looked at it for a long moment. "Chocolate has 2 O's," she said. "I know, I ran out of space." Emily walked to this table and sat down across from Lily, which put Nathan behind her, which she was aware of but needed a moment before she could deal with. She looked at the drawing properly. "This is really good," she said. "The tables are exactly right." "I remembered what you said," Lily told her, "about the tables being for families, so I drew families." She pointed to a cluster of figures near one of the tables. "That one's a dad and a kid and someone else." "Who's the someone else?" Lily looked at her with the particular expression of a 7-year-old who knows something is obvious and is waiting for the adult to catch up. "I didn't know what to call her yet," Lily said, "so I just drew her." Emily looked at the small stick figure next to the small stick father and the small stick child. It was wearing what appeared to be a green jacket, and it had dark hair, and it was holding, Emily looked more closely, what appeared to be a coffee cup. She looked up. Nathan had come to stand at the end of the table. He was watching her with the careful, undefended expression of someone who has already made their decision and is waiting for the verdict on it. "Lily," Emily said, "did your dad put you up to this?" "He said I could bring my markers," Lily said, with the technical precision of a child navigating a complicated question. "That's all he said." Emily looked at Nathan. "I told her you might come," he said, "and that the cafe would probably let her draw. Both of those things were true." Very careful wording. "I'm learning from you." She looked back at the drawing. The small stick figure with the green jacket and the coffee cup, standing next to a father and a child at a long table in a cafe with intentionally wrong perspective, and a chocolate that had run out of letters. "I owe you an apology," Nathan said. "A real one, not a statement." "You already—" "The statement was for the record. This is for you." He pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down, which put him at an angle to her rather than standing above her, which she recognized as deliberate. "I made you feel like a liability when you were the person who showed up when it mattered. When my father needed someone to just sit with him and help him breathe, you were there. You were there before I even understood you were coming." He paused. "You've been showing up the whole time. I've been managing." "You have a lot to manage," she said, not as a defense of him, just as a fact. "I know, but you were never something that needed managing. You were—" He stopped. Started again in a different place. "You brought something back, to this space, to the work, to Lily." His voice changed slightly on his daughter's name. "I hadn't heard her laugh the way she laughs around you in a long time. I didn't let myself think too hard about what that meant, because thinking about it meant thinking about what I wanted, and what I wanted scared me." "Why?" Emily asked. He looked at her straight. "Because the last time I loved someone, I lost her. And I'm not good at the part that comes before you know how it ends." The words sat between them on the table, quiet and significant and no longer avoidable. Lily had gone back to her drawing with the focused indifference of a child who has completed her assigned contribution to a situation and is now allowing the adults to handle the rest. Her marker squeaked softly across the paper. Emily looked at Nathan. He looked back at her without looking away, which was the thing she had noticed about him in January, that when it mattered, he didn't look away. He'd lost that for a while, and it had cost them both, and she knew that. She also knew that he was looking at her now the way he'd looked at her on a terrace in January cold, clear and direct, and asking nothing from her except for the chance to be honest. "I'm not her," Emily said. "I'm not Sophie. I'm not going to try to be. I know that. And I'm not easy," she said. "I push back on things. I argue with contractors at 11 at night. I make lists, and then I make other lists of problems with the first lists. I will disagree with you in professional settings, and I won't be sorry about it." "I know all of that." "Lily needs consistency," Emily said. "She doesn't need someone who shows up and then steps back every time it gets complicated." "I know," Nathan said. "That's why I'm asking. I'm not asking because it's the easy choice. I'm asking because I already know what it looks like when you're not here, and I don't want that for her, and I don't want it for me." He paused. "I know you resigned. I know that stands. I'm not asking about the job. I'm asking about—" "I know what you're asking," Emily said. He waited. She looked at him for a long moment. She looked at Lily, who was drawing what appeared now to be a cat in the corner of the cafe, because apparently the cafe had acquired a cat in Lily's revision of events. She looked at the long tables she had specified, and the light coming through the windows she had stood at in February, thinking about what this neighborhood needed and what she was capable of building. She had built it. It was real. It existed. "You have to stand next to me," she said. "Not in front, not behind. Next to." "Yes," he said. "When it's hard." "Yes." "When it's public and uncomfortable and people are making things up." "Emily." His voice was quiet and completely certain. "Yes." She looked at him for one more moment. "Okay," she said. Lily looked up from her drawing. "Okay, what?" Lily asked. "Okay, the cafe is going to have a cat," Emily said. Lily considered this seriously. "A real one or just in drawings?" "We'll negotiate." Lily nodded, apparently satisfied, and went back to her art. Nathan looked at Emily across the table of the cafe she had built in a neighborhood that needed it, and something in his face settled. Not into relief, which would have been too simple, but into something quieter and more durable than relief. Something that looked like a man arriving somewhere after a long and poorly navigated trip and being genuinely surprised to find the door still open. Emily reached over and picked up a marker from Lily's collection. Blue. She uncapped it and drew a small addition to the bottom corner of Lily's drawing, a coffee cup with steam rising from it in 3 careful curls. "Who's that?" Lily asked. "That's the cafe's coffee," Emily said. "It's very good. Is it the kind with little marshmallows?" "It's the kind with both." Lily accepted this with the gravity it deserved. She picked up her green marker and added something to the drawing. A small figure next to the coffee cup. Dark hair. Standing at one of the long tables. "Now she has a name," Lily said. She printed carefully below the figure in her deliberate 7-year-old letters. Emily. She said it with the simplicity of a child stating something that has always been true and is only just now being written down. Nathan looked at the drawing. He looked at Emily. Emily looked at the small green-jacketed figure with her name under it on a 7-year-old's cafe drawing, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not happiness exactly, because happiness was too thin a word for it. Something more like the specific gravity of belonging somewhere that has been hard-won rather than handed to you, and is therefore real in the particular way that only hard-won things are. She capped the blue marker. She set it back in Lily's collection. "Okay," she said again, to no one in particular. Outside, Callaway Street went about its Thursday morning. The laundromat next door was open. The elementary school a half-block up was between periods. A woman walked past with a grocery bag and glanced through the window at the warm light inside, and something in her expression shifted. The small private adjustment of a person who has just noticed that a thing they wanted to exist now does. Monday, the cafe would open. The neighborhood was ready. Monday came the way good things sometimes do, quietly, without announcement, as if it had not been preceded by months of broken glass and recycled press statements, and a woman sitting on concrete steps helping an old man breathe while cameras rolled. The cafe on Callaway Street opened at 7 in the morning. Emily was there at 5:30. Not because she needed to be. The team she'd built was capable, had been trained carefully, knew the systems she'd put in place. Marcus, who'd been a line cook at a hotel breakfast counter for 6 years and was underutilized in the way that people without connections often are, had the kitchen running with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd been waiting for the right space to work in. Dara, who ran the front counter, had memorized the menu and the regular neighborhood faces before the first day. The cafe did not need Emily Carter to function. She was there because she needed to see it open. She needed to stand in it at 5:30 in the morning when it was still dark outside and the coffee was just beginning to run through the machine and the long tables were set and the chairs were in place, and feel the specific weight of a thing you've built from a cold, empty room with bad lighting and good bones. She stood in the middle of the main floor for a while. Just that. Then she put on her apron and helped Marcus with the morning prep, because she was not a person who stood in the middle of rooms having feelings when there was work to do, and there was always work to do. The first customer came at 7:04, an older man she recognized from the neighborhood. She'd seen him at the laundromat next door, and twice walking a dog that was too big for the leash he was using. He came in, looked around, sat at one of the long tables, and ordered black coffee and toast. "Good space," he said when Dara brought it. "Thank you," Dara said. "We're glad you're here." He nodded, opened a newspaper he'd brought with him, and read it at the long table. And that was all, and it was exactly right. By 8:15, the cafe was 2/3 full. By 9, it had a line, not chaotic but steady, the kind of line that forms when a neighborhood has been quietly waiting for something and is now in the process of deciding whether it trusts it. Emily watched people come in and look around, the same way she had looked around when she'd first walked the empty space, cataloging potential, and then watched their expressions settle into something like recognition. 2 mothers came in with a combined total of 4 children between the ages of approximately 3 and 9. They took the largest table, which Emily had positioned near the outlet on the east wall specifically for situations like this, and for 45 minutes they operated in the organized chaos of people managing small children in public, and the cafe absorbed it without strain because the cafe had been designed for exactly this. An older woman came in alone and ordered tea and the banana bread, which was on the menu, and was, Emily could confirm, excellent. She sat by the window for an hour and a half and watched Calloway Street, and nobody bothered her, and she left looking like a person who had found somewhere to be. At 10:40, Nathan came in. He was not alone. Richard was with him, walking slowly but upright, and more like himself than he'd looked on the steps 2 weeks ago. Nathan was carrying Lily, who had apparently decided that walking was not her priority this morning, draped sideways over his arm like a comfortable piece of furniture. Her attention on her phone with the total absorption of a 7-year-old watching something she'd already seen 14 times. Emily watched them come through the door. Nathan saw her, and something in his face did the thing it did now. Settled, in the way that faces settle when they arrive somewhere they were trying to get to. "We're customers," Lily announced, without looking up from her phone. "We're not here officially." "Noted," Emily said. "I want the hot chocolate. Dad said I have to ask you if it's the good kind." "Come see for yourself." Lily slid off Nathan's arm and walked with great purpose toward the counter. Nathan watched her go. Then he looked at Emily. "How's it going?" he asked. "Good." She looked around the room, the full tables, the steady counter. Marcus, visible through the kitchen, passed through, moving with his particular economical precision. "Really good, actually." Richard Cross appeared at Nathan's shoulder. He was looking at the space with the careful attention of an old man who has built things and knows how to read them. "You did well," he said to Emily. Plainly, without decoration. Richard Cross was not a man who decorated things. This is what a neighborhood place is supposed to feel like. "Thank you," Emily said. "How are you feeling?" "Annoyed by the question," he said. "Which means I'm fine." He moved toward the long tables with the deliberate trajectory of a man who has identified where he wants to sit and is going there. "Get me whatever the tea is." Emily looked at Nathan. "He's been like that his whole life," Nathan said. "Don't take it personally." "I didn't." She tilted her head slightly. "I kind of like it." Nathan's mouth curved. Of course you do. The weeks that followed were not a montage. Life did not cooperate with montages. It moved in fits and starts, and Tuesday mornings that ran long, and Thursday afternoons that didn't go the way anyone planned, in negotiations and adjustments, and the slow accumulation of ordinary days that eventually, without ceremony, add up to something. The cafe found its rhythm. By the third week of regular operations, the elementary school half a block up had established an informal afternoon arrangement. Teachers walked small clusters of students down at 3:30, and the long tables became homework tables until 5, which was the thing Emily had described in the empty space back in February when Nathan was typing notes into his phone, and she thought he might just be humoring her. He had not been humoring her. This was something she was still, in small ways, learning about him. That when he paid attention, he meant it, and when he said he was listening, he was. Marcus, quietly and without fanfare, turned out to be one of the best breakfast operators Emily had ever worked alongside. He had opinions about egg preparation that were extensive and correct, and a gift for volume service that meant the cafe could handle its morning rush without the quality dropping, which was the thing that killed neighborhood spots faster than anything else. The moment they got too busy to be good. Dara knew everyone's name by the end of the second week. This was not a skill Emily had trained into the job description. Dara simply had it, the way some people naturally do. An authentic interest in whoever was in front of her that read immediately as real because it was. By week 3, regulars were requesting her section specifically. Emily ran the administrative side from a small desk in the back office that she shared, technically, with Arthur Wills's foundation liaison, a quiet young man named Gregory who was in the office approximately 3 times a week and was unfailingly pleasant and completely unobtrusive. She did not miss the chaos of the pre-opening period as much as she'd expected to. She missed pieces of it. The particular focus of building something from nothing, the days when the only agenda was the next concrete problem. But the running of it had its own satisfactions, which were different and more durable. She and Nathan had dinner on Friday nights, usually. Not always. His schedule and Lily's schedule and the general unpredictability of their respective weeks meant that usually was doing significant work in that sentence. But Friday nights when they could, at the kitchen table in his house rather than a restaurant, because restaurants meant public and public still meant occasional photographers, and occasional photographers still occasionally meant Ryan Delaney. Ryan Delaney's employer had concluded their review of the matter in the 4th week after Nathan's statement. The conclusion had resulted in Ryan's departure from the firm, the specific terms of which were not public, but were, by all accounts, not voluntary. He had not posted on social media since the week of the grand opening, which was either remorse or legal advice, and Emily didn't particularly care which. She had not forgiven him. She was not working on forgiving him. She had simply put him in the category of things that had happened, which is not the same as forgetting and not the same as indifference, but is its own kind of resolution. The resolution of someone who has decided that the amount of her attention he receives is going to be exactly 0, which was more than he deserved and less than he'd tried to take. Jade started college in the 2nd week of April, which was 3 weeks late because of an administrative issue with her financial aid that Emily had spent 4 extremely unpleasant phone calls resolving. The morning Jade left for the dormitory, Emily drove her and helped carry boxes up 2 flights of stairs in a building that smelled like every dormitory in the history of dormitories, and stood in the doorway of the small room while Jade put things on the desk in the specific arrangement of someone claiming a space as her own. Jade said, with her back turned. Yeah. Thank you. She turned around. Her eyes were doing the thing they did when she was working hard not to cry, which was a thing she'd gotten from their mother, that particular shine, and looking at it made Emily's chest do something complicated. Not just for the money stuff, for... She stopped, started again. For showing me that it's possible to start over and not lose yourself doing it. Emily leaned against the doorframe. She was not going to cry in a college dormitory. She was 30 years old and she had fixed a financial aid issue through 4 phone calls, and she was not going to cry in a dormitory. You showed yourself that, Emily said. I just covered the rent while you figured it out. Jade looked at her. Both things can be true, Jade said. Emily looked at her younger sister standing in her first college room in the middle of her first real step toward the life she'd been working toward, and thought yes. Both things can be true. She drove home alone, which took 23 minutes, and cried for approximately 16 of them. Not grief, just the particular release of someone who has been holding something carefully for a long time and has just been given permission, by the sight of it landing safely, to set it down. They got married in September. Not at a venue. Not at a hotel ballroom or a rented garden or any of the spaces that Nathan's social position made available to him and that Emily had looked at with Nathan for one afternoon before she said clearly and without apology, "None of these feel like us." "What feels like us?" Nathan had asked. She had looked at him for a moment. "The cafe," she said. He considered this for about 4 seconds. "Okay," he said. They told the Foundation's event team that the space was unavailable on the second Saturday of September. They told 31 people that they were invited. They ordered the food from a bakery Emily trusted and that had never done anything to earn her distrust. Marcus came in as a guest, and then, because he was fundamentally incapable of being in a kitchen without improving it, spent 40 minutes reorganizing the prep station before anyone could stop him, which Emily discovered and found more moving than she could easily explain. Lily was the flower girl, a role she had accepted with the gravity of someone taking on a significant operational responsibility. She had opinions about the flowers, which Emily had incorporated, and opinions about the music, which they'd mostly incorporated, and one very strong opinion about the hot chocolate, which was that there should be some, and which had been fully incorporated. Richard Cross sat at the front of the room in the chair they designated for him, wearing a suit and an expression that was the closest he appeared capable of getting to sentiment without acknowledging it, which meant his jaw was doing something tight, and he was looking at a fixed point above the small assembled crowd with the deliberate focus of a man who is not going to make a fuss. At some point during the ceremony, which was small and honest and took 19 minutes, because neither Nathan nor Emily was interested in the performance of ceremony for its own sake, Richard produced a handkerchief from his breast pocket. He did not use it. He simply held it. But he had produced it, which everyone present understood. Diane was there. Arthur Wills was there. Dara and Marcus from the cafe. The older man from the neighborhood who came in every morning with his newspaper, who had been invited on an instinct of Emily's that she couldn't fully articulate and turned out to be exactly right. Jade, who had driven 3 hours from campus and arrived with a card that Emily would not read until later, when she was alone, because she knew from experience that whatever Jade had written would require privacy to get through. Nathan said, in his vows, that he had spent 4 years being very organized about grief and had mistaken that for healing, and that Emily had shown him the difference without meaning to and without asking anything in return, and that he planned to spend a significant amount of time being someone who deserved that. Emily said in her vows that she had arrived in his life carrying a broken tray and a cut on her hand and a 2-hour shift and had not expected anything, which meant she had gotten everything. She said that she did not believe in perfect and did not want it, and that what she wanted was the thing they'd already been doing, showing up and staying and telling the truth even when it was uncomfortable, and starting over on the days when that was what was needed. She said, "I want to stand next to you, not in front, not behind. I've been practicing." He laughed. The real laugh. The one she'd first heard in the cold, half-finished cafe in February, and that still arrived with the small surprise of something that hadn't been there for too long. Lily, from her position at the front, said clearly, "That was from something." "Private reference," Nathan told her. "I want to know." "Later," Emily said. "You always say later." "And then later always comes," Emily said. "That's the deal." Lily appeared to find this philosophically acceptable. She ate a marshmallow from the cup she had been carrying since the beginning of the ceremony, which no one had managed to take from her, and decided the proceedings could continue. The Harrington Foundation's annual winter gala happened in January, 12 months from the night it had started. The Harrington Grand Ballroom was unchanged. The ceilings still stretched 4 stories. The 40 chandeliers, Nathan had counted eventually, and there were actually 38, still threw down their specific engineered light. The marble floors were still so polished that you walked above your own reflection. Emily wore navy, which was not the color she'd been wearing last year. She was not working the event. She arrived on Nathan's arm, which was a sentence that would have sounded impossible 12 months ago and was now just a fact, ordinary in the specific way that things become ordinary when they are real. Richard was there, better than he'd been in March, moving through the room with the slightly reduced velocity of a man who has been told in medical terms to take things at a different pace and has interpreted this as a suggestion rather than a directive. Lily was at home with Mrs. Henley, which she had accepted under protest and under the negotiated condition that there would be hot chocolate, the good kind, both kinds, upon their return. Emily stood with Nathan near the east end of the room and felt, with the mild discontinuity of someone returning to a site that carries weight, the distance between this version of the evening and the last one. Same room, different gravity. She was talking to Diane, who was here with her husband, who turned out to be a soft-spoken man named Carl, who worked in insurance and was clearly accustomed to social events he was only adjacently connected to when she heard it. Not the sound of a tray. Something smaller. A voice, pitched too high for the surrounding conversation, coming from the direction of the catering corridor near the south entrance. Emily looked. A young woman in a white catering uniform was standing just inside the corridor entrance, pressed slightly against the wall, with the rigid posture of someone using stillness as camouflage. She was maybe 22. A man, older, slightly flushed, the confidence of someone 3 drinks into an evening and enjoying the feeling of it, was leaning toward her in the specific way of someone who has decided that a staff uniform makes a person available. The young woman was saying something that Emily couldn't hear. The man was not moving back. Emily looked at Nathan. He was already looking at her. She handed him her glass. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She crossed the room in a straight line. She didn't think about it. She didn't calculate what it would look like or who was watching or whether this was her place to intervene or what came after. She crossed the room the way Nathan had crossed the room 12 months ago, because it was obvious what needed doing, and because nobody else was moving, and because some things don't have a deliberation stage, they just have a decision. She reached the young woman and positioned herself between her and the man, which was the most practical thing, just a body in a space, shifting the geometry of the situation without announcement. "Hi," she said to the young woman. She kept her voice easy, warm, but not performed. "I was looking for you." The young woman blinked. Her eyes were doing the rapid recalibration of someone trying to understand what was happening. "I'm sorry?" she said. Emily glanced briefly at the man who was doing his own recalibration, the same sequence she'd watched Ryan Delaney run through a year ago, checking who he was dealing with, estimating whether pressing forward still made sense. He looked at Emily. He looked at the room behind her, at the 250 people who were not watching and would be watching in about 15 seconds. He moved away without saying anything, which was its own kind of comment on the nature of that particular kind of person. The young woman exhaled. "You don't know me," she said. Low, private. "No," Emily said. "My name's Emily." The young woman looked at her. "I'm Maya." "Are you okay, Maya?" A pause. "I will be." Emily nodded. She understood this answer completely, had given a version of it herself, once, to a man who'd asked the same question in an east corridor near a coat check with a first aid kit. "There's a staff room through the back corridor if you need a minute," Emily said. "First door on the left, past the service entrance. It's quieter." Maya looked at her for a moment. The assessing look of a young woman who has learned, as most young women learn, to check before trusting. "Thank you," she said finally. "Don't mention it." Maya moved toward the corridor. She stopped after 2 steps and looked back. "Does it—" She started, stopped, tried again. "Does it get better? She gestured vaguely at the room, which was doing exactly what the room always did, indifferent and glittering and operating by its own specific laws. This kind of thing. Emily thought about a terrace in January cold, a banana bread recipe texted at 9 on a Sunday night, a 7-year-old printing her name below a stick figure and a drawing of a cafe that was still on the refrigerator in Nathan's kitchen, held up by a magnet shaped like a pineapple. "Yeah," she said. "It gets better." Maya nodded. She went through the door. Nathan appeared at Emily's shoulder. He handed her back her glass. He said nothing, which was the correct thing to say. "She'll be okay," Emily said. "I know." They stood for a moment at the edge of the ballroom. The string quartet was playing something Emily still couldn't identify and probably never would. Gerald Fitch was somewhere across the room, almost certainly telling someone about the avalanche. The chandeliers, 38 of them, she knew now, threw their specific light across the marble and the expensive clothing and the reflections of people walking above themselves. "Same room," Nathan said quietly. "Different year." He looked at her. "Are you glad you came back?" She thought about what this room had been 12 months ago. The cold, the crowd, the sound of a tray hitting marble, the particular loneliness of a person who is invisible until someone decides to make them visible for the wrong reasons. She thought about what she'd walked out of this room carrying, a cut on her palm, a man's name she hadn't known yet, the beginning of something she wouldn't have been able to name if she'd tried. "Yes," she said. "Are you?" He looked out at the room, then at her. "I've been coming to this gala since I was 9, he said. "This is the first time I've been glad to be here." She looked back at the room, at the light and the noise and the 250 people doing their patient work of being seen, and thought about what it means to return to a place that hurt you and find that it no longer has the same power over you. Not because the place changed, because you did, because someone crossed a room for you when you weren't expecting it, and you learned, slowly and imperfectly and at some cost, that the right response to that kind of grace is to eventually cross a room for someone else. Nathan took her hand. Not dramatically, just that, the simple fact of it, her hand in his, the weight of it, the ordinary warm reality of a person who has decided to stand next to you and meant it. Across the ballroom, through the south corridor door, Maya was probably sitting in the quiet of the staff room, catching her breath, deciding what came next. She didn't know yet that things get better. Emily had told her, but that kind of thing can only be believed once you've lived enough of it to stop doubting it. And Maya was 22 and the evening was still wrong, and the believing would have to come later, from living it herself. That was fine. That was how it worked. Some things couldn't be given. They could only be pointed toward. The gala continued. The chandeliers held their light. Somewhere in the city, on Calloway Street, the cafe sat dark and locked and ready for Monday morning, when Marcus would come in at 5:30 and start the coffee, and the neighborhood would begin its day in a place that was built for it, by someone who understood what it needed, which had come from spending enough years needing something similar herself. And 12 months from a night that had begun with the sound of breaking glass, and a woman on the floor of a ballroom trying to make herself small, Emily Carter stood in that same room with her shoulders back and her hand held by a man who had learned to stay, and felt, not happiness, which had always been too light a word, something closer to the specific quiet rightness of a person who has found the place where their life is actually happening. That was everything. That was enough.